Hello again. Welcome back to Read Aloud 3 and to the continuing effort to read our next chapter, 1 Samuel chapter 18. Firstly, just because I don't like leaving you hanging, the last comment I was making in regards to the scripture I've always heard the translation where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am. And this one said we're two or three. I'm not sure what version that is, but it's Matthew chapter 18, verse 20. And I had brought that up in the first video where I was trying to get to reading chapter 18. Had read it, but it didn't record. And I wanted to kind of just go with it. And so basically, I would like to say about that scripture is that I believe that it's, God's message to us in it is that he lives in fellowship. He's always lived in fellowship because he's a 3-in-1 God, right? The Trinity. And so it is important for us to as well live in fellowship, and that he is in that, not to say that he's not with us when we aren't gathered. So I just wanted to say that, and with no further ado, read chapter 18 of 1 Samuel. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one. Oh, I already read this. I did go back. I read the first paragraph. Okay. I think I'll go ahead and read it again because I didn't get very far at all. But if you want a little of commentary on that, you can go back to one of my last videos. After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. Whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was so successful that Saul gave him a high rank in the army. This pleased all the troops and Saul's officers as well. When the men were returning home after David had killed the Philistine, the women came out from all the towns of Israel to meet King Saul with singing and dancing, with joyful songs, and with timbrels and lyres. As they danced, they sang, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." Yeah. Saul was very angry. This refrain displeased him greatly. They have credited David with tens of thousands, he thought, but me with only thousands. What more can he get but the kingdom? And from that time on, Saul kept a close eye on David. The next day, an evil spirit from God came forcefully on Saul. Now, there was another time that this happened where that's why he was getting that kind of relief from the musician that was sent. I believe. I think that we have addressed God sending an evil spirit before. So you may want to go back to one of my previous videos to get some commentary on that. Okay. And then in the reference, another word that could be translated instead of evil is harmful. He says he was prophesying in his house while David was playing the lyre, as he usually did. Because I feel like David had come to play for Saul before, just to soothe him, because this had already happened where he was being kind of tormented. Saul had a spear in his hand, and he hurled it, saying to himself, "I'll pin David to the wall." But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had departed from Saul. So he sent David away from him and gave him command over 1,000 men, and David led the troops in their campaigns. In everything he did, he had great success because the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful he was afraid of him, because he led them in their campaigns. Saul said to David, "Here is my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you in marriage. Only serve me bravely and fight the battles of the Lord." For Saul said to himself, "I will not raise a hand against him. Let the Philistines do that." But David said to Saul, "Who am I? And what is my family or my clan in Israel that I should become the king's son-in-law?" So when the time came for Merab, Saul's daughter, to be given to David, she was given in marriage to Adriel of Meholah. So it's like, okay, he basically declined. Now Saul's daughter Michal was in love with David, and when they told Saul about it, he was pleased. "I will give her to him," he thought, "so that she may be a snare to him, and so that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." So Saul said to David, "Now you have a second opportunity to become my son-in-law." Then Saul ordered his attendants, "Speak to David privately and say, 'Look, the king likes you, and his attendants all love you. Now become his son-in-law.'" What more do you need to be persuaded? Well, you'll see. They repeated these words to David, but David said, "Do you think it is a small matter to become the king's son-in-law? I'm only a poor man and little known." When Saul's servant told him what David had said, Saul replied, "Say to David, the king wants no other price for the bride than 100 Philistine foreskins to take revenge on his enemies." Saul's plan was to have David fall by the hands of the Philistines. When the attendants told David these things, he was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. So it seems like he wanted to valiantly earn that position. So before the allotted time elapsed, David took his men with him and went out and killed 200 Philistines and brought back their foreskins. So he doubled it too. They counted out the full number to the king so that David might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave him his daughter Michal in marriage. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that his daughter Michal loved David, Saul became still more afraid of him, and he remained his enemy the rest of his days. The Philistine commanders continued to go out to battle, and as often as they did, David met with more success than the rest of Saul's officers, and his name became well known. Saul foiled again. So, yeah, it sounds like, I don't know, just that is interesting. We talked a little bit about the fact that Jonathan, his relationship and how it was kind of a covenant because probably, families coming together there too, and just in the land there being sort of this ordaining position that David was put in as well, or ordained, and now it talks about Michal loving David. So it sounded like his father Saul would think that would be a snare to him and keep him, from being successful. But it sounds like in opposition to that, he shot himself in the foot. Like it actually worked for him. So me and my relational gears start turning. When you're in good relationship, good marriage, not to say that marriage is always good, but that, it should not draw you away. There have been examples like Samson, where the women that he became involved with were not really for him, and they did distract him and were able to kind of make headway in the negative initially. So something to keep in mind when we're choosing which relationships to be involved in, especially when it's covenant lifetime agreement. as marriage is. So anyway, with that said, I'm going to wish you a happy Tuesday. I hope to see you on Wednesday, and I'm glad we made it through that chapter finally. See you tomorrow.